Beneath the storm-lashed towers of Eldervale Keep, the world seemed to teeter on the edge of oblivion. The night was a living thing. Wind howling through arrow slits, rain battered against ancient stone, and thunder rolling like the drums of war. In the heart of that fortress, Lady Serelis knelt before a flickering altar, the golden sheen of candlelight trembling across her face. Her lips moved in silent prayer, but the words tangled with memory and regret. All her life, she had been sworn to serve the vanished queen, a promise etched into her soul, binding her tighter than any chain. But now, with the kingdom shattered and traitors prowling the forests, loyalty itself felt like a curse. Outside, beneath the battered banners, the world was unrecognizable. Smoke rose in the distance, where villages once slept in peace. The king lay dead by a traitor's blade, and those who had sworn to protect the royal line now hunted its last defenders. Within these walls, Serelis was both warden and prisoner, her every action measured against the echo of her vow. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, feeling the weight of secrets she could never speak aloud. It was then, as midnight pressed its cold hand against the stones, that the sentry's horn split the silence. A desperate, fractured note. Serelis rose, her heart pounding with dread. Down the winding stair, she raced through shadowed corridors, footsteps silent as the dead. At the main gate, torches flared, casting monstrous shapes against the rain. There, slumped in the mud, was a lone rider, his cloak torn, his body battered, blood pooling beneath him. The sigil on his shoulder was unmistakable, the silver hawk of the enemy. In any other night, she would have sounded the alarm, but something in the angle of his head, the lilt of his broken breath, held her still. She leaned closer, and the storm revealed the truth. Cadron. The name shivered through her like a ghost's touch. Once they had run together in the sunlit courtyards, childhood laughter echoing along the ramparts. Once she had held his hand and whispered of dreams and kingdoms and forever. But forever had been shattered by duty, her oath to the queen, his allegiance to a cause she could never follow. The last time she saw him, he had begged her to leave with him, to choose love over loyalty. She had turned away, and the look in his eyes had haunted her ever since. Now, fate had dragged him back to her gate, broken and hunted. The guards hesitated, torn between suspicion and fear, but Serelis's voice rang with the cold authority of command. She ordered the gates barred and the rider brought inside. Her hands, steady as a surgeon's, pressed linen to his wounds, though her heart trembled with every touch. Beneath the grime and blood, she found the lines of the boy she once knew, the softness of his jaw, the scar across his brow, the memory of laughter that no longer belonged to this world. The keep was a fortress of secrets. Every torch-lit hallway whispered with betrayal. Serelis could not risk the other nights discovering Cadron's identity, nor could she explain the agony in her eyes as she tended him. She sequestered him in the chapel's crypt, beneath tapestries woven with the queen's crest, where the world grew muffled and close. The air between them was heavy, each movement measured, every glance laden with the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. She stitched his wounds in silence, the needle trembling as it pierced flesh and memory alike. In the hush, ghosts of their shared youth flickered. She remembered the summer dusk when they had hidden in the old library, fingers entwined, promising never to forget. She remembered the night she became the queen's shadow, swearing an oath that would cost her everything. In the candlelit gloom, Cadron stirred, whispering her name like a prayer. Serelis's heart twisted, torn between the loyalty that defined her and the love that had never died. Outside, the storm raged, battering at the keep's defenses as enemy scouts prowled the woods. Serelis moved like a phantom, hiding Cadron from prying eyes, her every step a battle between fear and longing. She risked the wrath of her own command, knowing that discovery would mean death for them both. Yet in every stolen moment, her hand brushing his fevered brow, the fleeting touch of their fingers, something ancient and irrepressible stirred. As dawn threatened the horizon, the keep grew colder, the silence broken only by distant horns, a warning that enemy patrols were drawing near. Serelis stood alone in the chapel, the taste of dread sharp on her tongue. She knew what she risked, knew that compassion could unravel everything she had sacrificed. Yet she could not look away from Cadron, nor silence the memory of his arms around her, the promise of a future she had once believed possible. If you had to choose between the oath that defines you and the heart that betrays you, which would you surrender? Imagine the cost of compassion when loyalty itself is a curse, when every act of mercy might doom you, and every heartbeat is a rebellion. Serelis's every breath was a prayer for courage, every glance at Cadron a silent confession. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest within. The hours dragged like centuries. Eldervale's ancient stones seemed to listen, bearing witness to the agony unfolding within their halls. Serelis lingered in the crypt after tending Cadron's wounds, unable to leave, unable to stay. The weight of her choices pressed down, suffocating. She remembered the last words the Queen had spoken, the dying wish she had sworn to uphold. It was that promise, sacred, unbreakable, that had driven a wedge between her soul and Cadron's, that had forced her to deny the only joy she had ever known. Now, with the enemy tightening its noose around Eldervale, Serelis felt those old certainties crumbling. Each heartbeat was an act of treason, each gesture an admission of love she could no longer deny. Cadron, feverish and weak, gazed at her with eyes that held both accusation and forgiveness. In his presence, every mask fell away. She wanted to confess everything, to lay bare her heart, to beg for forgiveness, to dream once more of escape. But the walls of her loyalty held her fast, and words died on her lips. Outside, the enemy horns sounded again, closer now, a low, mournful call that sent shivers through the keep. Serelis pressed her palm to the cold stone, feeling the vibrations of approaching doom. She knew she could not hide Cadron forever. The risk was growing, the danger mounting with every hour. Yet she could not turn him away. The tangled roots of duty and longing bound her as tightly as any iron shackle. In the hours before dawn, Serelis lingered by Cadron's side. She watched the rise and fall of his breath, the slow healing of his wounds, the flicker of hope in his eyes, even as the world outside collapsed. In those moments, time seemed suspended, the rest of the world fading to shadow. It was only here, beneath the velvet darkness, that the truth of their bond could be felt, raw, unyielding, forbidden. The keep itself seemed to sense the coming storm, its stones groaning beneath the weight of secrets. Serelis moved through the corridors like a wraith, checking locks, whispering orders, praying for time. Every step was a gamble, every heartbeat a countdown. She clung to the memory of what once was, and the fragile hope that something might yet be salvaged. But the future was as uncertain as the storm beyond the walls. When at last the first pale rays of dawn crept across the flagstones, Serelis stood at a crossroads. The keep was surrounded, its defenders weary and suspicious. Inside, her heart was a battlefield, love and loyalty warring for supremacy. She knew the hours ahead would demand everything she had to give. Yet she could not forget the touch of Cadron's hand, the memory of a promise whispered long ago beneath velvet shadows. Would you dare betray everything for one forbidden touch? In the silence before the world awoke, Serelis made her choice, not with words, but with actions. She would shield Cadron from the world no matter the cost. And in that decision, she sealed her fate, entwining her destiny with his in ways neither could yet foresee. The distant horn sounded once more, echoing through the dawn. The enemy was at the gates. Within the chapel's gloom, Serelis and Cadron prepared to face whatever came next, bound by a love that could not die, and a loyalty that threatened to destroy them both. The secrets of Eldervale trembled on the brink of revelation, and the storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest of longing within. Dawn crept into Eldervale not with warmth, but with a chill that slid beneath the stones and into the bones of those who still clung to hope. The storm outside had eased, yet within the keep a different tempest raged, one born of memory and fear, of longing too dangerous to name. Lady Serelis moved like a shadow through the ancient corridors, her every step measured and silent, the weight of her decision pressing deeper with each heartbeat. In the quiet, she could hear the enemy's horns echoing across the hills, could feel the tightening noose around the keep, and still she pressed onward, driven by the memory of Cadron's face, pale, wounded, yet burning with the ghost of trust. They became fugitives within their own home, slipping through secret passageways, carved into the stone by hands long dead. Serelis led, remembering every twist and turn from childhood games now tinged with terror. Behind her, Cadron moved with a limp, his injury slowing him, but his eyes never left her. There was comfort in his presence, and also pain, a reminder of the night she had chosen oath over love, a wound that festered in silence. She remembered the last time she had seen him before his exile, the way he had reached for her, not with hope, but with a question she dared not answer. Now, as they ducked beneath cobwebbed arches and skirted the edges of forgotten chambers, the air between them pulsed with all that had gone unsaid. Outside, enemy soldiers scoured the grounds, their torches flickering like malevolent stars. Within, Serelis and Cadron moved as one, bound not by words, but by a thread spun from regret and yearning. In a dusty alcove, Serelis paused, her breath shallow as she listened to the thud of boots above. Cadron reached out, not to comfort, but to steady, his fingers brushing her wrist. The contact was brief, yet it spoke volumes, of trust battered but not broken, of desire that survived in the cracks between loyalty and loss. For a moment, they were no longer fugitives, but two souls suspended between past and present, searching for a future neither dared imagine. In the safety of the hidden armory, Serelis tended Cadron's wounds anew. Her hands were sure, but her heart faltered as she saw the scars that ran deeper than flesh, the marks her choices had left behind. She began to speak, voice low and raw, confessing the truth of her promise to the lost queen. It had been made in blood and desperation, a vow that chained her heart and doomed their happiness. She had turned away from Cadron not out of coldness, but out of terror. Terror that loving him would cost the kingdom its last hope. Terror that in choosing him she would forsake everything she was sworn to protect. Her confession shattered the silence, each word a stone cast into the night. Cadron listened, his gaze unreadable, but when he finally spoke, it was with a gentleness that made the walls seem less cold. He revealed his own secret, not just of exile, but of purpose. He had returned to Eldervale not for revenge, but because he carried news that could change the fate of all. Somewhere, hidden from both traitor and tyrant, the Queen's heir yet lived. The rebellion had not been for glory, but for redemption. For a chance to restore what had been lost, to atone for the pain his absence had caused. The revelation burned between them, a fragile hope kindling in the ruins of certainty. As the day wore on, the keep grew colder, the enemy's presence heavier. Serelis and Cadron plotted their escape in hushed tones, the urgency of their mission sharpening every glance, every touch. Old wounds were reopened with every memory that surfaced, the laughter they had shared in the old library, the first time their hands had brushed beneath the boughs of the winter garden, the bitter night of parting when Serelis had let duty tear them apart. Yet, in the tight quarters of the keep, intimacy crept in where words failed. A lock of hair brushed from a fevered brow, a hand steadied on a crumbling stair. These became confessions of their own, gestures that said what pride and pain could not. Night fell once more, and with it came the certainty that their sanctuary could not last. The enemy had discovered the outer tunnels, and the keep's secrets were close to unraveling. Serelis made her choice as she had in the chapel, not with grand declarations, but with quiet resolve. She led Cadron to a hidden passage beneath the chapel. its stones slick with the memory of 1,000 desperate prayers. The darkness closed around them, thick with the scent of earth and ancient incense, and in that darkness they found a sliver of peace. Serelis pressed her forehead to Cadron's, a gesture of farewell and promise. She would see him to safety, even if it meant breaking the last of her sacred vows. As they emerged into the night beyond the walls, the world seemed impossibly vast and indifferent. The forest loomed, wild and unforgiving, yet it was freedom of a kind. The enemy would soon discover their absence, and pursuit would be swift. There was no room for fear now, only the echo of the choice Serelis had made. Love over loyalty, heart over oath. The story pressed itself against the bones of those who listened, whispering its question, "What would you sacrifice when every promise made threatens to break you? What lies in the space between duty and desire?" Beneath the ancient trees, Serelis and Cadron found fleeting refuge. The sky above was bruised with the memory of storm, the air alive with the promise of danger, yet for a heartbeat they were simply two souls beneath the velvet shadows, the cost of their choices written in every glance and every stolen touch. The path ahead was uncertain, haunted by the ghosts of the past and the threat of betrayal. But for the first time since the world had shattered, hope dared to flicker again. The keep of Eldervale faded behind them, its secrets left to the darkness. Ahead, the road twisted into the unknown, a journey fueled by love that refused to die, by loyalty transformed from curse to lifeline. And as the wind carried the sound of the enemy's horns into the night, the listener was left to wonder, in a world where every oath can become a prison, is it ever too late to choose the heart over the crown? The tale, heavy with longing, pressed on into the darkness, where only those brave enough to hope could find the dawn. Dawn found Serelis and Cadron deep within the tangle of the wildwoods, the world behind them swallowed by mist and uncertainty. The air was silvered with dew, the trees arching overhead like ancient sentinels, their branches whispering secrets neither dared to voice. Each step away from Eldervale was a step further from everything Serelis had ever known, yet with every heartbeat she felt the brittle walls inside her begin to fracture. The path was treacherous, riddled with half-buried roots and the silent menace of unseen pursuers. The enemy's horns had faded into the distance, but dread lingered, a shadow at their heels, a reminder that the world would not let them simply vanish. They pressed on through bramble and bog, guided only by memory and hope. Serelis carried the weight of her oath like a brand, every promise made to her lost queen burning beneath her skin. Cadron moved beside her, limping from his wounds, yet unyielding, his jaw set in grim determination. Yet beneath the veneer of strength, old wounds throbbed, wounds no salve could heal. Their silence was thick, each lost in a thicket of regrets, until at last exhaustion forced them to seek shelter in the ruined abbey that rose from the forest gloom. The abbey was a ghost of grandeur, its walls buckled and its roof hungry for the sky. Vines curled through shattered windows, and the wind moaned through hollow archways like the memory of a prayer. There within the fractured sanctuary, Serelis and Cadron kindled a small fire, its golden flicker painting their faces with the ache of sleepless nights. In the hush, the storm outside seemed to retreat, leaving only the hush of falling ash and the relentless thrum of their hearts. It was here in the ruin's embrace that the past could no longer be denied. Serelis sat with her knees drawn to her chest, eyes fixed on the flames, the lines of worry etched deep. She spoke, her voice raw. Of the night she became a guardian of secrets, how she knelt before the dying queen, swearing an oath that would bind her fate to a cause and tear her from Cadron's side. She confessed the terror that gripped her, the sense that in saving a kingdom she had murdered her own heart. She told him of the letter she burned, the message meant for him, her hand trembling as she consigned their future to ashes because duty had called her elsewhere. Each word was a blade, peeling back the years of silence. exposing wounds that had never truly scarred. Cadron listened, his gaze unflinching, the firelight tracing the hollows beneath his eyes. He spoke at last, not with anger, but with the heavy resignation of a man who had spent years searching for meaning in pain. He revealed how her absence had driven him to rebellion, how the world's betrayal had mirrored her own, and how vengeance had become the only balm for a heart abandoned. Yet beneath the bitterness there lingered the memory of hope, the secret reason for his return. He had come not just for vengeance, but for her, for the hope that the girl he had loved and the woman she had become might still exist somewhere beneath the armor of loyalty and regret. The confessions hung between them, fragile as spider silk. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping the shattered stones in a mournful rhythm. For a moment the world narrowed to the warmth of the fire and the nearness of a hand reaching across the gulf. Serelis let her head rest against Cadron's shoulder, her breath catching as his arms circled her, careful but unafraid. In that quiet, they allowed themselves the luxury of memory, of hands entwined beneath the old library's shadows, of laughter carried through the autumn leaves, of a promise spoken in the hush before dawn. "What would you do?" the story pressed, "if love returned to you at your most broken? Would you choose forgiveness or let the past devour you whole?" But peace was a luxury the world would not allow. As the fire dwindled, distant hoofbeats shattered the silence, echoing through the ruined nave. The enemy had tracked them, their torches flickering through the trees like hungry eyes. Serelis rose, panic and resolve warring in her chest. There was no time for hesitation. The cost of delay would be blood. She pressed a weathered map into Cadron's hands, the secret path to the hidden heir, the last spark of hope for a kingdom teetering at the edge of ruin. She begged him to go, to finish what they had begun, even as every muscle in her body screamed to run with him. Cadron protested, desperate to defy fate's cruelty once more, but Serelis silenced him with a trembling touch, her final benediction, heavy with promise and pain. She would draw the enemy away, she vowed, luring them into the maze of ruins, so he might escape. For the first time, her oath was not a chain but a blade, a sacrifice offered not to a crown or a cause, but to the love she had nearly let die. Their parting was a thunderclap, one last embrace beneath the broken archway, her fingers memorizing the line of his jaw, his lips brushing her brow in silent benediction. She whispered the words she had once burned. "If love endures beyond the ashes, find me in the dawn." She vanished into the rain, her silhouette swallowed by shadow and storm. Cadron watched her go, hope and agony locked in his chest, before turning to the path she had marked, a destiny now burning in his hands. The abbey's ruins became a battlefield, as Serelis moved like a wraith through the darkness, drawing the enemy's hunters with the flash of her cloak, the echo of her footsteps. She fought not for the crown nor for vengeance, but for the slender thread of hope that somewhere, in another lifetime, love might be more than a curse. The night raged with the clash of steel and the cries of pursuit. Serelis was cornered at last, her back against the shattered altar, the enemy demanding surrender. Her eyes never wavered. In her defiance she became legend, a tale whispered by those who saw her stand unbroken, a beacon in the ruin's heart. She yielded only when escape was no longer possible, buying Cadron the time he needed to vanish into the wilds with the promise of a new dawn. Bound and dragged away beneath the jeers of her captors, her gaze lingered on the horizon where morning threatened to break. She held tight to the memory of Cadron's touch, the echo of his promise. Days bled into weeks. News reached the farthest corners of the land. The Queen's heir, guided by a mysterious stranger, had been found. The kingdom stirred with hope, the old order trembling on the edge of renewal. In the dungeons of Eldervale, Serelis endured the slow passage of time, each heartbeat a prayer that her sacrifice had not been in vain. Shadows pressed close, but she clung to the memory of that night beneath the ruined abbey. The night loyalty became a gift, not a curse. Cadron returned only once, slipping past guards and darkness to stand at the threshold of her cell. He could not free her, not yet, but he pressed a single wildflower through the bars, velvet petals the color of twilight, a silent promise that the story was not yet over. Their fingers brushed, hope flaring in the gloom, and in that instant, the world was remade. The tale asked, would you wait a lifetime for love to return? Would you dare believe that even in the darkest place, dawn might come? In the years that followed, the kingdom healed. Songs were sung of a knight who defied the world for love, of a woman whose loyalty was both her burden and her salvation. Eldervale's stones bore silent witness to the passing of seasons, but some nights, when the wind howled through the corridors, it was said that a candle flickered in the highest tower, a sign that hope, once kindled, could never be truly extinguished. And so, beneath the velvet shadows, where loyalty became a curse, love endured, unchained by time, undimmed by sorrow, waiting always for the day when dawn would break at last.